What's rockin' world? It's Anthony Chansmith here from Simple Creative Marketing, and we are back with Authentic Influence Live. And today we are talking about scorecard marketing and how to leverage scorecards to grow your brand and your business. And I've brought onto the show my man, Glen Carlson. I'm going to bring Glen in a second. Glen is an award-winning entrepreneur and co-founder of Dent. Dent is a multi-award-winning business and leadership development company with structured training programs facilitated by successful business speakers and mentors. Glen and his team are best known for helping business owners develop an unfair advantage in their industry by effectively creating what he calls a personal monopoly. And we're going to learn all about that. The company is, I think it's currently at 50, a team of 50 across 12 different time zones. And they have produced over 500 business authors. Welcome to the show, Glen Carlson.
Thanks, brother. Great to be here, mate. Appreciate you having me.
Now, just for some context, I first learned out about the KPI program, which is Key Person of Influence, the book, back then it was a 40-week accelerator. And I actually participated in a program when I was marketing manager for Hub Australia. And Glen and Brad, who's the CEO, they've known each other for a while. And I actually went through the program, and it was a fantastic experience. And Glen and I have met on different occasions, and it's always fun to have a chat with Glen. So why don't we just start there, Glen? Let's go back to why you started Key Person of Influence and what is now Dent. I guess why did you focus on helping business owners expand their influence?
Yeah, so Dan's obviously the author of the Key Person of Influence book. Wasn't written at the time. We started our first business when we were 21. We're essentially marketers and promoters. We'd promote authors and speakers. We put them on stage, and we're spending about $250,000 a month on ads, right? So this is before Facebook. Everyone still had a Hotmail account. Facebook was there, but you certainly couldn't commercialize it. It was still a toy at that point. And we would find business owners with a product or a service, and we would promote the CEO, we would promote the founder, we would promote the leader, the entrepreneur, and we'd put them on a stage, pull an audience, they'd deliver a compelling presentation, and then people would go on and obviously then want to do business with them in some way. And so Dan and I were always sort of behind the scenes. Maybe we'd do an MC role, etc. But we remember sitting behind the AV desk, and there was one particular speaker. He'd built sort of $3 billion businesses, and he, in 45 minutes, created more opportunity and created more value and created more money in a 45-minute talk than we were personally going to make that entire year. And we were running a multi-million-dollar business at this point. And that's where it really kind of clicked, right? Because we didn't want to be in the rat race. We didn't want to be working for someone else. We wanted freedom, autonomy, influence, expression, etc. Hence our own business. And it was kind of like in our mindset, there's being an employee, and then there's being a business owner. And what we really realized in that moment was there was another gear, there was another level of influencer, right? And now the word influencer is used everywhere. It's Instagram, it's this, it's that, it's girls in bikinis with an Instagram account. It's like, I'm an influencer, right? It just wasn't a term. It wasn't in the language at the time. Instagram didn't exist. But we realized that there was something really powerful about this idea of the founder brand. And that there was something very different that went into making an individual compelling, and that individual could then make a product or a service compelling. And it was much, much easier and cheaper. Like when we looked at, our numbers, it was much easier to promote a human, right? Because people respond and react and engage and trust people. It's much easier and cheaper to promote a person that would then promote their product and service than it was to try and just promote the product and service directly. And so then to try and shorten the story a little bit, the GFC hit. We hadn't been applying any of those same principles ourselves. It was just business as usual. And we built a fragile business, and we had to look at what was the knowledge we had that was anti-fragile, that was recession-proof, that was, global catastrophe-proof. And we realized, we knew how to produce influencers. We've been producing them for almost 10 years before we started Dent. We knew how to build multi-million-dollar businesses, right? We'd done that ourselves as well. Why don't we put the two together? And so that's when we started working with small businesses, specifically around helping them apply the same principles that we'd been applying with our clients previously. And that was 10 years ago. So we built the Key Person of Influence Accelerator specifically to be able to help position traditional businesses and their founder as the go-to brand in their industry.
So how did you, I love the story that you tell about just getting started, right? I think it was the first event in London. I'm trying to remember if that's where it was, where you brought people into a room, or was that in Australia? I can't remember.
Mate, I'm not sure. There was a lot going on at the time, but look, we launched in the UK, right? So the first Key Person of Influence program was in the UK. So I'd actually been living in Bali for a couple of years, came back with Dan. The first event kicked off in the UK, and then within 9 months, I was back in Australia, in Melbourne, and I was gearing up for our Australian launch, because I guess one of the things we learned in the GFC was we'd started the business in Australia, but then we'd moved it to London. And so much of our business was constrained within the M25 in the UK. And so when the GFC hit, we were really wishing, our business went to zero. So we were wishing we had some global exposure, because Australia was actually fairly well insulated from all of that. And so starting the new business very early on, we wanted to be global. We didn't want to be constrained in any one geography. And I guess the benefit of a partnership like Dan and mine is he wanted to stay in the UK. I wanted to come back to Australia. Perfect. And we were then able to sort of expand out up to Singapore, obviously across to New Zealand, the US, Canada. So it was a good deal.
Now, one thing she talked about, just the importance of building influence, of having a recession-proof business. We're obviously going through somewhat of a recession right now with the current pandemic. So what would you say then for those listening to this who perhaps may have been hit by COVID or looking to, they've done the pivot or looking to expand, what in your eyes is a recession-proof business? What are the key elements to that?
Yeah, so everyone's talking about like AI and all these fancy trends and biotech and what have you. That the biggest trends that I think are most relevant for small businesses and have been before COVID are media, in terms of the ability for anyone to be able to be their own media broadcaster of YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, etc. These different platforms, podcasts, things that we're doing right here. The ability to broadcast a message is massively underutilized, leveraging technology, right? So the tools and apps to be able to make small businesses more efficient and effective, and then leveraging intellectual property knowledge, like the knowledge that people already have in their head is underutilized. Intellectual property is the most valuable asset, literally. If you look at the Australian Stock Exchange, 60% of the value of the ASX is valued based on intellectual property, not plant, capital, machinery, or physical infrastructure. It's the stuff that literally people have come up with and packaged. And if you look at what are the three most valuable categories of IP, it's brand, it's media, and it's technology. And so whether you are struggling as a result of COVID or whether you're thriving as a result of COVID, even before COVID, the three big ways to be able to not just recession-proof your business, but to be more scalable and to be more efficient, to be more profitable, is to leverage media, to leverage technology, and to leverage the knowledge and the intellectual property that you already have between your ears. And you take a traditional business, doesn't matter if it's a fish and chip shop or a consultant or an engineer or hairdresser or whatever it is, and you kind of look at, all right, what's the physical manifestation of what we're doing? Right? We're cutting hair here, or we're doing corporate advisory, or we're doing engineering plans, or architectural, or whatever it is, interior design. Like there's what we do, but then there's the knowledge that enables us to do that. And I would say when you sort of step back and look at extracting the knowledge that you have in your head and then leveraging that with media and with technology in interesting ways, that's where you become digital. It's where you become scalable. And that's where you get to enjoy more fun, flexibility, and freedom. And so for a lot of our clients, I know COVID was a real challenge and a blessing, because it forced that strategic timeline to be accelerated. So, we've been named as one of the world's leading business accelerators. I think we've been trumped by COVID. I think that was a pretty powerful accelerator. I think everyone's been innovating like mad. But certainly, to answer your question, more media, more technology, and more IP.
Love it. Now, one of the messages that really stood out for me, and I've stuck with, going back 5 or so years when I was going through the program with you, that you often repeated was your I want it in your words, but I'm going to probably screw it up here. But the idea is basically that you're sitting on a like a pot of gold, and you just talk to your experience, your expertise. Can you talk a little bit about that? And
So, one of the things that I've discovered being in the inner circle of a hyper collaborative entrepreneurial environment, where people are kicking goals, they're winning awards, they're being featured in TED, they're fast growth businesses, etc. And then you get the people that kind of want that but aren't there yet. There's usually a lot of fear, doubt, insecurity. Am I enough? Especially when we talk about the idea of writing a book or putting thought leadership out there, or positioning yourself with awards. It's hard not to. You'd also almost need to be a little bit psychopathic or just have an ego that's way too overblown not to self-reflect and go like, am I enough? And in my experience, people are standing on a mountain of value that they cannot recognize for themselves, right? It's if you've ever climbed a mountain, I remember climbing a mountain called Mount Agung in Bali, and as I climbed that mountain, it gave me a better view of this other mountain, and that's kind of the problem. The higher you get up the mountain, you get to see all these other mountains, and they all look great and beautiful. So, oh, look at that mountain over there and that mountain over there, and the metaphor, of course, is comparison. Look at that person over there and that business over there, and all these other great mountains surrounding you, but you can't see your own. And so it's very easy to think that everyone else has got this great mountain of opportunity, this great mountain of value, but you don't, right? All you can see is the shrub and the rocks, and you remember the struggle and the grind of getting as high as you've got, but you can't see the majesty of your own mountain because you're so close to it. And so part of what our business does, as you know, is provides people with that reflection, that mirror, to be able to help them recognize the mountain of value that they're on. And the moment we get someone in an environment, right, with a community of like-minded people, and everyone's doing it together, and everyone's got a bit of that fear, doubt, and insecurity, because that's a very human thing. Doesn't matter if you're the CEO of a business with 50 employees or 500 employees, or it's just you starting out. It's the human condition. And so I think if everybody could recognize that, regardless of what they think or feel, if they've been serving people in their life and solving problems for people in their life, and they've been doing that to some degree of efficacy, then they are standing on a mountain of value, and they know it or not. And their job is to get out of their own way, discover that mountain of value, and share it with the world. And to us, that's what it means to make a dent in the universe.
Now, for someone listening to this, obviously, I would recommend that you go and sign up for the KPI program and you get involved with the Dent team to actually extract that information. But let's say we're not ready to go there yet. What's the first couple of steps to actually unpack that mountain of value?
Yeah, look, if anyone wants to find me on Instagram, you can just Google Glen Carlson, I'll come up, or find me on Instagram. Happy to get anyone a copy of the Key Person of Influence book. That would be a good place to start. Just personal message me and say, hey, heard you on Anthony's show, and give us your address, and we'll shoot you through a copy of the book. More than happy. We've also got always events and conferences and different things that you might be able to attend as a guest. But I think the first thing to do is just reach out and say, hey, love the book, please. And that's a good rabbit hole to go down. Of course, people can find me on Facebook, plenty of video content that we've got there, YouTube, same thing. the podcast, the Dent podcast, which has cracked 100 episodes, where I interview key people of influence and unpack their journey and their story and the nuance of some of the different successes that they've had, and certainly more recently some of the challenges and how people have pivoted and developed over COVID, applying these principles. But probably the most tangible first thing might be a copy of the book.
I agree. Now we're going to go from, let's assume that you've already gone through the process of extracting your IP. You've got a process or methodology, and something that really, I've been excited to see within the Dent community is people putting up and sharing their scorecards. Let's talk about scorecard marketing, Glenn, and why you and Dan are so big on, like, now is the time to be putting out a scorecard and utilizing those for your business.
100%. So, well, essentially, maybe let's just step back. Like, what is a scorecard? Well, essentially, we have a software platform called ScoreApp. You can go to scoreapp.com, check it out. And we've built this specifically because of an experience that we had. So this is about 7 years ago now. We're releasing an updated edition of the Key Person of Influence book. And we're all talking about influence, and we're talking about how important it is to pitch your business and publish content, have great products and raise your profile and do partnerships and all this sort of stuff. And we were creating great content. People could watch content on all the different platforms. They could read the book. They could come to our conferences and events. Great. But we realized it was really one way, right? The communication was one way, which it is for the vast majority of marketers. I mean, there might be comments and interaction and all that sort of stuff, but you don't really know who you're talking to. And you're providing people with insights, but you're not really sure whether those insights and that education is landing and really helping people understand the problems that they're experiencing and how to solve that. And if you think about sales is like someone's got a success checklist in their mind. So if you're talking to a prospect, they've got an idea in their head of what they want their life to look like, right? And it's like tick, 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 tick. It's like if it's an interior design, I've got an idea of what I want my home to look like, right? And so everyone's got this checklist in their mind. And I guess all sales and marketing is about trying to highlight that checklist for people, but also help them recognize that they're not there yet, right? They've got a bit of a deficiency right now, but it's all very sort of subjective, and it's, I'm reading an article and I'm trying to get those boxes ticked, etc. And so we thought, well, what about this idea of just putting together a success checklist? And so we did it for the Key Person of Influence rewrite of the book. And there was a company called SoTech, and we got them to build us a little yes-no quiz where people could answer a whole bunch of questions that would sort of benchmark them against how good they were at pitching or publishing content or raising their products. And so we'd ask a question like, how, are you comfortable pitching your business in a compelling way in under 30 seconds? Or have you won a celebrated industry award in the last 12 months? It's yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And so if you were to give that to any of our established clients, they'd be going yes, 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 and they'd be getting a really high score. But if you gave it to any of our prospective clients, they'd be going, yes, oh, no, no, maybe, no, yes. There's a lot more deficiency there. And so what was great, we just put it in the book and said people could go to the website, do it for free. And what started happening is people were able to instantly benchmark themselves as to how influential they were. And I mean, people can just Google Key Person of Influence scorecard. It'll pop up. You can go down the rabbit hole yourself and benchmark your own influence. But this was great because it was quantifying it in a way that reading a book or listening to a podcast or watching a video couldn't do. It kind of grabbed people by the reality of their situation that they couldn't hide from. It's like, oh, okay, this is the reality. I got a big gap here. They'll have some strengths, but they'll also have some weaknesses that it would identify. So that has just added a lot of value from our clients. We were creating books, we were creating podcasts, we were creating all this value to try and create value from our customers' perspective, our prospects' perspective, that they had a level of insights that they couldn't get anywhere else. And hey, presto, this did it in a super efficient way. So great value for the customer. But now from our team's perspective, this was like, we didn't expect it, because all of a sudden we're now getting those individuals that do the scorecard. We were getting their contact records and we're getting the answers to all these questions. And so by the end of the scorecard, people could book straight in to a call with one of our team. That was a game changer. All of a sudden, the team are getting a whole bunch of sales appointments that are automated. And we already knew what all the pain points were and what these people wanted without even having to talk to them. So the sales cycles contracted massively. Our conversions went through the roof massively. It was like a salesperson's dream to be able to call someone up and already have the answers to 40-odd questions around where all their pain points were. And essentially, the whole sales conversation boiled down to, do you want to improve the score? And people would go, yes. And it's like, well, we got this program and this process, and here's how it improves the score. And here's a bunch of our clients that have done it, and here's what they've scored. And, this was their before and after and all that sort of stuff, which, obviously is where, your interest in this came in from the perspective of case studies, being able to quantify their before and after performance, which we can talk about. But this was a game changer for us. And, for the last 7 years, I got the numbers here. So since 2017, which I have the data for, just coming through our scorecard, we've been averaging 30 leads a week. That equates to 4.5 conversations a week, just from those 30 leads. 4.5 conversations a week on average, just under 2 sales a week, which leads to about 21,000 in revenue just from that lead source, just from the scorecard, right? So that's a 7-figure $1 million annual revenue just from that lead source. So not only is this adding great value, not only is this accelerating sales cycles for us, but it's bloody working. It's performing as a sales tool. And it wasn't like a cheesy, 7 mistakes report or something, which is sort of what most people were doing at the time. It was a really sophisticated professional tool. So of course, a lot of our clients started asking us to build one for them. And we built about 15 or 20, but they were about 10 grand each at the time because it was all bespoke and custom. And so 2 things happened. The first thing happened was we bought the business that was building the scorecards. So we rolled that into the Dent group, and that was SoTech. And the second thing that happened about 1.5 years ago was we raised $1 million to be able to build Score App, to raise some money and build Score App as an actual, a software as a service platform, right? So now we've got over 1,200 users from all around the world running their scorecards across any industry you could imagine. It's been our first experience growing and scaling our own technology platform, which has been challenging but also really rewarding at the same time. We've crossed the threshold just recently where we're not relying on any of the venture capital to fund the business. It's all now self-funding based on our clients. So long as people spend the time in the first sort of 30 days to get their scorecard up and running, they don't turn it off because they just keep generating high-quality, data-rich leads. And that's kind of how we got started with it, mate. It turned into a scorecard for us, which was valuable for our business. It turned into an acquisition, and then it turned into a whole new startup.
What a crazy journey. And I really love just the path that you went through, having a few people interested in what you were already doing because you guys were presenting the scorecard and that was generating you leads. And I remember when you whipped it out and showed the back end during one of the workshops, and like people's jaws were dropping. Like, that's rich data that could be your sales team could go and have conversations with. And that's one of the hardest things. I know as a consultant sitting on with a prospect, sometimes you're just digging in that conversation and you're trying to get to real information.
And you're wasting their time and you're wasting your time, and you both know it's a sales conversation. You're kind of doing this little dance, and it's like both of you would rather be doing something else, right? Whereas the beauty of this is it just gets straight to it. It's like, do the scorecard, takes 5 minutes. Do you want to improve the score? Yes or no? Because of course, however you build your scorecard is how you build a scorecard around what your business does. Right. So where in the business, for the key person of influence scorecard, where in the business of improving that score? And so it becomes a very easy way of helping people self-diagnose, A, is this a problem worth solving? And B, is this the sort of organization I want to work with? And in my experience, the organizations that are the best at helping people identify the real issues that need solving get the business.
Now, your score, well, the KPI or the Dent scorecard has 40 questions on that. Would you recommend that as an ideal number of questions for a scorecard, or is that?
Yeah, so, well, now we've got over 1,000 users, right? We're getting a lot more data and a lot more insights. I would actually recommend people start with about 10 or 15 questions. So we already had a fairly strong marketing background, right? And so we went all in 40 questions, benchmarking people against our methodology, et cetera. But there was a whole architecture and IP behind that. So for those that have a marketing background, yeah, between 35 and 40 questions with a variety of categories. Like if you've already got a methodology that you write about or talk about that you could kind of benchmark people against those steps, yeah, go straight to about between 30 and 40 questions. But if you don't, and everything I just sort of said, you're like, what method? What front? No, I don't have that architecture. Great. Just 15 questions that would help someone benchmark whether or not they're on track or off track. Nice and easy. No categories. Just keep it really simple, because we're just finding people are surprised that often the simpler scorecards, they get done a lot faster. There's a lot less abandonment, and they lead just as effectively, if not more effectively, to people booking straight into a calendar for a follow-up conversation, right? They just need a yes, no. All right, I need to fix this. Let's do it, right? And so, basically I would say if you've already got a lot of experience in IP, like if you're an author or a speaker, or, you've got a degree of sophistication around your internal IP already, between 30 and 40 questions. If not, start easy, start generating qualified leads, start experiencing what it's like being able to have a conversation with people where you've got that data at your fingertips and you can literally start introducing to every call, would you like to improve the score as part of the close, if you like. And as that starts to develop, improve it.
Yeah, I just really like the ability to have a baseline, or start with a baseline and say, okay, this is where you're at. That's your score, right? So whatever industry you're in, I've seen this work in many different use cases. Can you share maybe one or two examples of the types of businesses that are using the scorecard and what type of results they've been able to produce?
Yeah, we got heaps. Well, I mean, so we've generated over 1 million leads now for our clients. We've got big celebrity authors like Jay Shetty. So he uses it because he has his coaching business. So he's trying to take his 10 million followers on social media and consolidate those down into the people that should be coaches. So we've got big celebrities, we've got Fortune 500 companies, we've got FTSE 100 companies using it. But for most small businesses, it's really cool. Like there's one of our clients, Jackson Ugnami. So he runs leadership training for kids in schools, right? So kind of a simple sort of a business. Now, accessing principals, accessing teachers, hard. And that was his biggest issue, right? Once he was in the school, they loved him. They kept bringing him back and his team, etc. He set up Scorecard, and within the first 30 days, generated 100 leads, combination of principals and teachers from around the UK. So that's a pretty good deal. Mark LaRouste is a very well-known TED speaker in the UK. He does culture consulting to big corporate. Within the first 2 weeks, Score App became his number one source of leads. Darren Finkelstein here in Australia, yes. The boat guy come the accountability coach.
Love it.
So he spent, I forget the numbers, but he spent about $300 or $400 on Facebook ads promoting his scorecard. That generated, I think it was about 300 or 400 hits to the site, and people went through, which led to about 6 people booking straight in for a conversation with him. 4 sales came out as a result, which is $60,000, all within his first 30 days of business.
Yeah, first month, I think. That's just
first
wicked.
month of business. We just get this over and over and over and over and over again, is that, certainly anyone that's already got some marketing happening, right? They're already kind of out there. They got a bit of traction. They got, some social platforms. They're doing some videos. They're doing some podcasts. Like what this does to providing that ready-made lead magnet is really cool. So Phil Calvert is another example, social media speaker. One of the things he said, he's constantly getting people on Facebook Lives. But of course, if it's on a Facebook Live, if you don't get them onto your database, you've got to pay Zuckerberg again to try and access them, right? You don't get their details. And so last presentation he did to 120 financial advisors, he just pointed them to his scorecard, and he had 95 of them, of 120, 95 do the scorecard, and not just are on his database, but are on his database with name, email, phone number, and the answer to 35 questions that they've answered, specifically about the strengths and weaknesses of their social media strategy, which he's in the business of improving. It's kind of like
I love it.
It becomes a bit of a no-brainer, because marketing's just so complicated, right? And people just want to go back to the day where you just have to be good at what you do. Wouldn't it be nice, right? If you could just be good at what you do and you didn't also have to be, a super marketing person. And I guess because a scorecard is built around so many layers of psychology, right? When, like, for example, one of our clients, Gina Ledniak, who I think you know as well, when she first did the scorecard, she had to answer the question, have you won a respected industry award in the last 12 months? She had to say no. Now, that's a little micro tension, right? That's a little, like it's a pebble in your shoe. It's like, God damn it, I want to be able to say yes to that question, but if I'm dealing with reality, I can't. And I guess part of what a scorecard does when someone does is it brings reality into high definition. It's like, here's the reality. You can't ignore it. So it's almost like taking the blinkers off, pulling the head out of the sand. And she's like, okay. So she worked with us. Within 2 years, she wins Telstra Businesswoman of the Year, right? So she's able to tick that box, win, right? And so the nuance of that, right, to try and get to that in a sales conversation where you can kind of touch that tension point, that pain point, that pebble in the shoe, given that you don't really know where people's real motivations lie. Whereas when they go through 30, 35 odd questions where you can really get that nice comprehensive view. Now, I'm saying this from a sales perspective because we built it as a tool to help businesses generate more data, which leads to more leads, which leads to more sales. And that's great for businesses. But it's also bloody valuable for the people doing the scorecard because it gives them this reality check of it's like, I know it's like getting an x-ray. It's like, I know the problem now. We got a hairline fracture there. We got to fix it or not fix it or whatever it is. You can deal with you can deal with the reality, which is really valuable. And you can't get that level of insight just watching a video or reading a book often.
100%. And I know there's so much you can do with that data as well. So with my being the marketer here, with my marketer hat on, where do we get content from? Like everything that people put into your scorecard really gives you, here's your content strategy. Go and talk about these problems that people are having, right?
Oh, not just that. You can if you connect it with your CRM, based on how people score, you can send them different communication, right? So ours is structured in a way where if people score low on pitch, well, they'll get a particular email that kind of says, hey, you did well on this, but you didn't do so well on pitch. You're likely to be experiencing some of these challenges and frustrations as a result of having a low pitch because, those problems are fairly predictable. And so we can be much more nuanced and personalized. And I think the important word is relevant to people based on what they're actually dealing with, as opposed to just having to broadcast sort of generic content to our audience. The moment someone's done that scorecard, we can be hyper personalized. And I think, the biggest businesses in the world are using hyper personalized marketing. I'm pretty sure Siri is listening to me right now. It's just not available to small business, whereas it is now, right? With something like Scorecard, you can use hyper-personalized marketing, just not in a creepy way, right? You can use it in a really, a high integrity, high value manner, where by using that information, you get to be more relevant, more effective, which means you get to make more sales in less time, which makes you more profitable, which means you get more of what you want, they get more of what they want. Everyone's happy. It's a great tool.
All right. Now, if you're listening up to this point, I want you to go and ping Glen on Instagram. He's Glen Carlson. Get a free book and scorecard. Just send him a message. Let him know that you've come from my podcast. Glen, let's talk about case studies.
Yeah, man.
Because I'm doing research for my book, and I'm looking at organizations and companies that are effectively leveraging case studies for in different parts of the buyer journey. So, for attraction, trying to bring people to your work and what you're doing, but also, we've talked about sales conversion and how scorecards can help you really have sales conversations. Case studies are also in that conversation. They can actually support, the demand generation and the sales enablement. Can you talk about just give us your take on case studies and why they're useful, why you invest in them?
Yeah, well, I tell you, the first real time I got the value of a case study was when I was presenting back in the early days in Melbourne. And we didn't have any case studies in Australia yet, right? We had a few in the UK. And so I'd sort of cherry picked a few of the case studies. We had videos of them, etc. So we'd always sit our clients down and go through the video, and I can share a bit of a script that we use on that. So then we can, because one of the issues is, people would often back in the day say, oh, can I speak to some of your clients that have already gone through the program, right? Now, we haven't had that question in 7 years or so, but at the time we used to get it a lot because we didn't have the podcast, we didn't have any of this sort of stuff. And so instead of bothering our clients every time, someone wanted to talk to someone, we were just like, look, can we just have the conversation once? We'll capture all the bits, we'll zip it all up into a cool video so we can show people and hopefully reduce that objection. Because we wanted to make sales, but we didn't want to bother our clients. So that was an insight on its own. So we had a few of these videos, and then I'm presenting to a room of about 150 odd people, and I do that every couple of weeks. And this one presentation, I had a bunch of business services case studies. I had a financial planner, I had an accountant, I had an engineer, some stuff like that. And there was a woman at the back said, oh, I just really love this, but it clearly it's just not right for me. And I'm like, oh, how come? And she's like, well, I'm a naturopath, but all of your case studies were business services, and I don't do business services. And I was like, oh. Now, we'd had a bunch of naturopaths in the UK, but we hadn't had any naturopaths or anyone in that kind of allied health sort of world signing up, allied health and alternative health signing up in Australia. And it kind of clicked. It's like, oh, I hadn't been relevant to that whole group. And so anyway, she came on board because I explained, no, let me show you this case study, and let me show you that case study. But anyway, the very next session that I did, next 150 odd people, I made sure I included a case study from a naturopath that we had in the UK, and we had 2 naturopaths sign up in the audience that day, right? So like it became, you would think Sarah, my wife, she's just gone to, we're selling a house, right? And she's just gone to dress it, right? So you're going to get a bunch of great furniture and put it in there and make it sexy, etc. Because people just don't have an imagination, right? They walk into an empty house and it's like, this is shit, it's empty. I don't want to sit on cold tiles. What is this house? No, we're not buying this. As opposed to, you rent a couch. It's like, oh my God, look at this place. Look at that couch. It's amazing. People are funny. And so if we kind of approach this idea that people just don't have an imagination, and from our perspective, you would think, I'm talking in general business terms, you'd think people would understand that as a naturopath, they could apply the same principles as an engineer or as an accountant, but like, no, like we needed to really make that link explicit.
Yeah.
And so that's where we started putting a lot of effort into working out, what are the big categories of industries that we work in? And do we have the case studies for those particular industries. And if we didn't, we'd have a big question mark on it, and we'd look for the people coming through that were in those industries that were doing really well, and we'd say, hey, look, can we get you in front of a camera? Can we get you on the podcast, etc.? And so, yeah, case studies are a big deal for us. And if I can just keep going just on this little roll, because the final piece of the puzzle here is in the Key Person of Influence book, we talk about profile. And a lot of people worry about profile being meaning that they've got to become this arrogant self-promoter. And it's like, no. Profile isn't about you, right? The secret to profile is to get known publicly by the success of your clients, right? So you're putting the spotlight on your clients. You're putting your spotlight on the case studies and the success stories. Doesn't matter if you're selling drill bits. It doesn't matter if you're selling engineering, infrastructure, project management. It doesn't matter, right? It's the successes of your clients that demonstrate the real results that you deliver. And so being able to have those case studies on websites, to be able to have those case studies on video, to be able to have a podcast where you can unpack those case studies long-term story. I was just talking actually on my podcast. It's like a fractal and a fractal, right? So I was doing another interview with Catherine Maslin, who's one of our clients, great success story, naturopath. And so I'm doing a podcast to kind of unpack her story and her journey, right? Capturing it there. And she's talking to me about when she's launching her podcast, talking to her most successful clients that have had huge transformations for the podcast, and having those long form conversations there. So when anyone has, a similar issue like, infertility or, chronic fatigue or whatever it is, it's like, I'll listen to this story with, Bob or Jane or whatever it is on the podcast. And within, an hour, that person's just heard this incredible transformation that's so relevant to exactly what they're experiencing. Solved. And so get known by the success of your clients. So we are big on case studies, success stories, capturing, documenting those as a big part of what we do.
Now, for those watching the video, you can actually see on the screen, I pulled up the Dent website, and I just love the way the categories are laid out. These are the types of businesses we work with. Here are the different segments or sectors, and within that, then you've got a couple of stories, and they link to a video, which is a video, or I guess an interview with the client or them on stage pitching their business, which is part of the program. I just love how you've integrated that into a system. A question I commonly get, Glenn, is how do you actually measure the effectiveness of case studies? So if someone's listening to this and they're going, I love what you're saying, Glenn, I want to invest in it, I'm going to get videos done of all my clients. Okay, but how do I actually know that that's working for me? How would you respond to that?
We've never really thought of it like that. I'm just trying to think though if there's anything in my brain that could be a real specific answer to that question. We think in terms of ecosystems, right? So we don't sort of look at any one thing. Like people ask me, should I write a book or should I get a scorecard? It's like, no, do both, right? You want the book and the scorecard and the awards and the case studies and you want the whole ecosystem of things to be able to come together to be able to have that sort of impact, right? So I would say to go that it is an essential component, and it's probably the most important component for someone in early stage as well. Like I was thinking of all the things that would have certainly one of the biggest force multipliers, just as per my original story. I went from having no naturopaths, just including a case study there, to having naturopaths signing up where we didn't have any of them before. So while we don't try and measure the result of case studies specifically, I don't even actually know how you would isolate that. But I know for a fact that without them, business was hard and we weren't making sales in particular categories. And as soon as we do have them, business is easy, or sales are easier, and we are making sales in that category. So I think you could argue very, very comfortably that you're doing yourself a massive disservice not to have them. But also because they can, you've got to decide to get them. You've got to decide to compile them. And the mistake that I see people making is once they decide to compile them, they don't do it well. and the case studies aren't effective once they've got them. So I would say, A, case studies are essential. B, they're amplified as part of a broader ecosystem of things that you bring to the table to add credibility. But I would say then the final thing, though, is that if you're going to do it and put the energy in, put just a little bit of extra energy in and just do it right the first time. Because, many times I'll see like a testimonial, a case study, and it doesn't say shit. It's like, meh. Okay, there's a person with a little round photo and some words next to it, but they're really not saying a lot. And I can't imagine who that's actually speaking to. So whenever we do a case study, we really think about, and we work with the person that we're extracting the case study from to kind of articulate, look, we want this to be relevant. We want to make sure that you're talking, to the same sort of person that you were before this, with the same problems and the same frustrations and the same issues and the same challenges. Can you remember that? And they're like, they got to open the folder in their head and go back there, because often people have forgotten what it was like, right, before they were struggling. So did that answer the question?
Yeah. I'm going to say, having worked with thousands of clients now, building their case studies for them, I have a similar answer, and I say, look, it's part of your marketing mix and your sales mix. It's not the only solution, and it's not, obviously, if you're trying to optimize for SEO and search engine growth, right?
Yeah.
Case studies are probably not the best thing to do that. You've used them in your podcast. You've got your clients appear on your show, and and they actually talk through their journeys and their successes and their failures, and that's powerful, right? So it does so much more. And something you do really well with case studies is you repurpose them, right? So you have videos that go onto your LinkedIn and onto YouTube, and you've got them in your email blasts, and you've got them, you've got literally case studies walking onto the stage at your events and talking about, giving their pitches, right? So it's just fantastic how you put that all together. We're going to wrap up. I know we're just about a bit over time here, Glenn, and I want to respect your time here. So 2 more quick questions for you. First, what's one resource, whether it's a book, video, podcast, something that's really helped you understand marketing for business?
Wow. That's a big question. What is one resource that has helped me understand marketing for business? Okay. So we have a framework in our business called LAPS, right? And we measure our LAPS: leads, appointments, presentations, and sales. So a lead becomes a lead whenever it hits your database, right? Doesn't matter where it comes from, right? So that would be number one. An appointment is where that person is invited to and accepts to either come along to an event or a one-to-one conversation or a boardroom meeting, or basically, essentially a sales call, like come and join me for a sales conversation. If someone accepts that, that's an appointment. When they're actually in attendance and you have the opportunity to have a conversation, either one-to-one or one-to-many, if you're selling at scale, that would be a presentation and then a sale, right? And so it would be easy for me to say, this book or this podcast is a resource, but I would actually say a spreadsheet where you're measuring your LAPS, leads, appointments, presentations, and sales every single week. So you cannot hide from the reality, good or bad, is actually going to provide the best feedback loop to be able to help you improve. So then when you do hear a little snippet from a podcast or a book or something, you've actually got the data you need to be able to optimize for yourself. I have never met a profitable business that doesn't know their numbers. And most small business owners especially want to avoid measuring anything to do with sales and marketing because they're afraid of what the numbers will show them. And yet the moment you start dealing with the discomfort of an underperforming funnel, if you like, or an underperforming set of numbers, you seek to improve those numbers. What gets measured gets improved. It's a cliche because it's true. So I would say in terms of the things that have helped me in my marketing and guiding me to improve my marketing and focusing on what I need to be focusing on, it would be just measuring my LAPS religiously every single week and then looking at, what's the problem that I need to fix? Is it the conversion between leads and appointments, or appointments to presentations, or presentations and sales? And, how do I go down rabbit holes and jump online and find influencers and books and podcasts that relate to just that one thing? right? Because if I didn't have the laps that I was measuring, I'd be lost in just an infinite amount of noise, which is the marketing education world. So basically, if you want more sales, if you want to build a better business, you just got to do more laps.
Do your laps, people. I really I love it. Okay, last one for you, mate. What's one thing that you do now that you're a father and obviously a husband and also an entrepreneur? So what's one thing you're doing for your mental health?
I meditate 20 minutes twice a day, every day, without fail, no matter what. And I think it should be taught in schools. I was very caught up in the external world. I was very caught up in trying to find happiness and peace of mind and confidence and all these things in achievements in the external world, and yet none of those achievements ever actually made me happy. And one can have a beautiful family and a beautiful child, etc., but still be wrestling with the existential kind of challenge of, who am I and what am I doing in the world? And I was in a situation where I thought building a successful business, having a brand that's built on the premise of business as a force for good and contributing and supporting, great causes and organizations, and having a great team and a great culture and a family and a beautiful daughter and a house and a big block of land and all the stuff that sort of people tend to think, wow, wouldn't that be great? And I could look at my wife Sarah, and I'm like, I love this woman. I can look at my daughter, and I love this child, and I can look at my business and I go, I love this business, and yet there's still this big hole. God, it's like, what the hell is this about? And one of our first speakers actually that we used to promote back in the day before Dent was a guy called Dr. John DeMartini, and he said, nothing that you can experience through the senses will ever satisfy the soul. And I found that to be true. And so for me, twice a day, dropping into meditation, dropping into quietening the nervous system, drawing away from those senses, and sort of, as Deepak would say, I think, dropping into the gap of just pure consciousness, and then being able to come back up again and perform action in the world where that action is now informed even just a little bit with sort of a bit of Tinkerbell fairy dust on top. For me, not only I think has that given me the answer that I needed, at least, to the challenges I was experiencing existentially around life and happiness and deep fulfillment. Every day, twice a day, Vedic meditation.
I love that. I really appreciate the honesty there too, and it's not uncommon. I've actually heard that from multiple people who are deemed successful on the outside, and they've just gone, there's a void, and they're trying to find, what is that? The trappings of success, I suppose, and that's an interesting journey. And the good news for everyone listening to this or watching this is you can start meditating right away. There's nothing, you don't have to wait to crack the $1 million success or the $1 billion success to get there. Really appreciate your time today, Glenn.
And there's something about it. Yeah, there's something about meditating that I think connects one to the same impulses that are driving and organizing nature. Nature doesn't struggle to thrive. She doesn't struggle to organize herself. She doesn't struggle to overcome challenges and problems and adversities, and whether it's a bushfire or we spill a shitload of oil into her ocean or something like that, she finds a way to do her thing, without stress and without frustration. Now, the way she responds to that might not be particularly good for humans, but she's good, right? And I think that when we drop into that consciousness, we come out with a little bit of the magic that is guided by nature, and that shows up as charm, and that shows up as curiosity, and that shows up as interest and desire. And it's just, then life just becomes, well, follow the charm, follow the desire, what most excites and interests you. And I think for most people, they are chasing those desires of a very superficial nature because they're not connected to the source. But when you're able to connect to a level of source, then all of your desires that are manifesting are in some way drawn from and enabled by, and let's say guided by, something more. And I'm not sure it's possible to articulate what that something more is, but if one has not had the experience, I would make that the priority over becoming a key person of influence, over getting a scorecard, over working on how to solve the problems of your business, because there is a truly effortless way for it all to come together, and it's not going to come through a piece of technology or another app or another book or another podcast. It's going to come from something that is your innate right and gift to access, which is, what it is to be human. So, mate, thanks for having me.
Thank you again, Glen Carlson. Everyone, please head over to, we can go to dent.global as a website, or you can hit up Glen on Instagram.com, and that's Glen Carlson. And I'll certainly link to all the resources mentioned here. I'm going to have to do some research on the type of meditation that Glen's into, but certainly there's a lot of value in this conversation. Thanks again, mate, and I'll be seeing you real soon.
Beautiful, brother. Go make a dent, mate. Thanks for having me.
Ciao.